Thank you so much, Mr. Carl Wasty. Now, there's only 1 week until Valentine's Day. Sunday the 14th is the day to show the people in our lives just how much they mean to us. We all know the bonds of love that are formed overnight, but over time with little moments. Now, love is not just reserved for couples, it's also seen in the bonds between two brothers. And today we're joined by South African Paralympian Achmat Hassiem, whose life changed when he saved his brother's life during a shark attack. Achmat, so good to have you here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And so thank you so much for having me.
Oh man, now you are one of the legends. I've known you for such a long time, but for anybody who hasn't heard your story, let's quickly set the scene for them. So it started off as a normal life-saving practice for you.
Yeah.
The boat drops you and your brother off, and then you guys begin one of your exercises, and then you see a black fin in the water.
Yeah. So we're at Muizenberg, and I remember my brother being the deepest one in the water at the time. I was sort of like in the middle, and a friend of mine was in the shallows. So basically the boat had to launch itself into the water, pick up the guy in the shallows, pick me up, and then my brother, and then bring us back to the shore. So it's quite a simple scenario. And then as I was looking at my brother just out towards the sea, something caught the corner of my eye coming from my right-hand side in Muizenberg. And as I looked at it, I remember seeing this little triangle on top of the water. And this triangle just became bigger and bigger, and eventually it started moving like that towards my brother. And I remember looking at this triangle, and I decided to see what is attached to it. Yeah. I looked underneath the water, and that's where I saw a 4.7 meter great white shark attached to this fin. Immediately I looked at my brother, and I thought to myself, you know what? The last thing I want to do is see my brother being attacked in front of me. Yeah. So I think naturally a big brother instinct kicked in, and that's just to protect my younger brother. And what I did was I sort of like started drumming on top of the water to draw the shark's attention away from him and put it on myself. Yeah. At that point, I just screamed at the lifeguards, and I said, get my brother out of the water, get him out, get him out. And that's when I saw this fin turn and it just go down. Next thing I know, the lifeguards were busy pulling my brother into the rescue boat. And that's when the shark came up from my right-hand side. It didn't attack me at first, it kind of just nudged me on the side. At that point, I remember rolling against its body, and its pectoral fin eventually hit my leg. And that's when I kind of rolled up against it quite hard. Next thing I know, the shark's tail comes up, splashes, hits me in the face, and I remember the shark just turning its massive body around. Next thing I know, I was face to face with the shark, and it's just human instinct to kind of have like a bit of a, try to get away from something of that magnitude. Yeah. And I remember this thing just charging at me, and strangely enough, the only thing I could think of at the time was to climb on top of its back. Yeah. And as the shark kind of lunged forward, I remember just taking my left hand and putting it on the shark's nose. And I remember the shark kind of gnawing at me, so my hand was kind of just moving back and forth. And next thing I know, as I push the shark's head past me, I just take my body and I kind of slam it into the side of the shark's head, and I take my right leg and try and throw it over the shark's back. And at that point, my right leg just did not want to come forward, and I couldn't understand why this leg was not coming forward. Yeah. So that's when I turned around and I saw that half my leg was in the shark's mouth already. At that point, the shark kind of shook me on top of the water, and I remember screaming at my brother, and I said, Tariq, please don't let me die. And that's when I looked at my brother and I kind of reached out for him, and that's when the shark pulled me underneath the water and dragged me for about 70 meters towards Seal Island. Yeah.
And I mean, here you are today. That is probably one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. I don't think anybody would be able to react like that, the way that you did. What was Tariq's kind of, how has he received this whole situation? How has what you did kind of changed his life, and how he sees you as his older brother?
Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually my leg broke off underneath the water. And immediately I swam for the surface because I need to breathe more than anything else. Next thing I know, my brother was leaning over the side of the rescue boat, looking at me underwater, and put his hand out. And that's when our two hands kind of came together like that. And my brother pulled me out of the water. And he just said, I've got you, I've got you. He jumped on top of me, took his one hand, closed my eyes with his one hand, and just grabbed what was left over from my leg with his other hand to kind of create a tourniquet. And next thing I know, we are being taken back to the shoreline. And my brother was lying on top of me, and I just said, how bad is it? And he said, don't worry, you just got a little cut on your foot. And immediately we got back to the shore where I was airlifted to Constantiaberg Hospital. I got to the hospital, and my brother was standing on top of me, and he was crying. And I remember saying, Tariq, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, everything is fine, but you didn't come out so great. Yeah. And I said, what do you mean? I said, Tariq, what's important is that we're speaking to each other now. You're alive and that I'm alive, and that's the most important thing. And he said, well, if you look underneath the blanket, you'll see that something didn't go so well. So I looked underneath the blanket, and that's when I saw that half my leg had been bitten off and amputated. Yeah. I think the role that he kind of plays in this whole situation is that, you know, our family is very positive. I mean, it's just me, my brother, my mom, and my dad. Yeah. And we grew up being very positive, you know, always seeing the positive side of life. And just the attitude that my mom and my dad brought us up with is absolutely amazing. So we always kind of had this captain attitude, if I could call it that. Yeah.
Well, you certainly have. You're such a massive inspiration. Thank you so much, Achmat. Thank you for what you mean to Tariq. Thank you for the bond of brotherhood that you share. And thank you for inspiring the nation today.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely amazing. Now, this is a great inspirational story for all siblings out there. Over the past few weeks, Lindor has asked you to share your little moment stories with us about your loved ones and those in your lives, and the entries have stormed in. Tomorrow we reveal the top 4 couples who will stand a chance of winning the amazing trip to Mauritius.
This Valentine's Day, give the gift of bliss. Lindor from Lind.